and welcome to today's webinar, A Leader's Guide to Employee Retention Success with our guest speaker, Randy Gorick. Now, while we're waiting on everyone else to arrive, go ahead and jump into the chat. Let us know who you are, what company you work for, and where you're calling in from. As you do that, you may notice that we have the Q&A feature enabled for this webinar. So if you have any questions right now, or if anything pops up while Randy's giving the presentation, go ahead and send them over to us using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, which is a separate from the chat function. Now, as you continue to drop those messages in, and please do keep them rolling, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off by introducing myself. My name is Danielle Look, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Team Engine, where we provide software to recruit, engage, and retain your on-the-go workforce. And I specifically create the tools and resources, like this webinar, that you see on our website and social media. If you've never seen our resource library before, I'll drop a link in the chat to that, as well as a link to our blog feed. Also, before we begin, I really just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for making the decision to be here today. I know how hard it is to set aside time for this kind of learning and personal development, especially when there are fires to be put out and deadlines to be met. But I'm confident that you'll find today's presentation to be worthy of your time. So thank you for being here and investing not only in yourself, but in your team. And that's why we're all here today, right? To become better leaders for our teams and understand our own role in their decision to stay employed with the company or to move on to other opportunities. So without further delay, I'll hand it over to our guest to get started. Randy, welcome.
Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate it very much. I also thank you for organizing this webinar and thank Team Engine for hosting it. I'd like to thank everybody who's in attendance for being here and giving me the opportunity to share with you some of my experiences, some of my ideas on employee retention. I think the fact is that everybody came here looking for a few things, and I will share with you 3 leadership strategies for employee retention success. When we're done within the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to share with you 5 actions to achieve employee retention success. And who doesn't want that? And tell me, I'll also share with you some of the biggest mistakes leaders make that impact the success of employee retention. Now, some of this you may already know. Some of this may be no surprise for you, but my hope is you pick up a nugget or two from whether what I present or what it is that others may contribute to this webinar. But I think if anything, I want you to go away recognizing this is an opportunity for you to think. Think about the topic. Think about the challenges that we're going to present. Think about how it impacts you and think about what you can do about it. That's really going to be the biggest takeaway I think you're going to get from this webinar. To help you think and help you prepare for the future, we promised you a small ebook I put together called The 9 Success Factors for Exceptional Leadership During Challenging Times. We have challenging times today, but we are also going to have challenging times in the future. This ebook will be sent to you by Team Engine at the conclusion of today's webinar. As mentioned, you have the opportunity to put in questions and give me some chat in here, and I won't be able to see all of it. Danielle will help me out, so if you have questions, please feel free to include them. We'll save a few minutes at the end to answer any of those questions. We'll also answer any additional questions you may have in what we call the Coach's Corner. That'd be me. So let me start off with maybe asking you a few pool questions to make sure that I have a good idea of who the audience is, because I learned a long time ago, hey, you got to preach to the audience. So Danielle, go ahead and launch poll question number 1 for me, if you don't mind, and see what we come of that. Yeah, which of the following best describes you? You only get one choice, but who are you exactly, as they would say? And Danielle, I'll let you close that up and share the results whenever it is that you think is appropriate. I don't get the chance to see the results, but maybe I will here. All right, so look at this. We have a pretty good mixture. We've got some, a third of you are owners or senior leaders. We've also got about a third of you almost being HR professionals, which is awesome. Sales and marketing, 5%. Technology representing 8%, and a collection of others. So that's pretty good, 23% or so. So that's really good. Thank you for that. Now, Danielle, while we have everybody's attention, let's see if we could answer the next poll question. We service a great deal of folks in the construction industry, manufacturing of building materials, and we also do a lot of other industries as well. And let's see what we have here for representation. All right, so wow, we got 62% of us are in construction, 27 in manufacturing, and then 11% in others. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with me. That'll be helpful as we go through this. And then let's go for one more poll question before we get started. And let's talk about your view of employee retention for your organization. Is it a problem? If you have a problem with it today, you're just a little bit concerned, or no, we're covered. We've got no problem here at all. You guys are pretty quick. It looks like we've got most folks concerned. We have some folks with a problem, and I'm really happy to hear that there are 4% of you that don't consider this to be an issue. So that is really awesome. So let us get started with this here. Let's go. Thank you for the feedback. It's going to help me. I'll share some ideas with you as we go along that's related to what we just talked about. But first of all, why should we care about employee retention? I mean, I've got some ideas why we should care. And for those that have a concern, you probably have a lot of ideas as well. But here, let me share 4 ideas with you. And then if you feel so compelled, put into the chat box some of your ideas. But first of all, hey, the cost to replace people is out of control. Whether it's a forklift operator on a construction site or it's a senior leader, right-hand person on your team, the cost of replacing people is a concern when you have people leave you. You also have a loss of experience and knowledge. That's a really big problem when you have somebody who's been you've invested in for 5 years, 10 years, heck, even 6 months. Sometimes the experience and knowledge that goes out the door, you're losing that, and that's going to negatively impact your organization. You also have this issue of suddenly somebody is left that has an impact on your other employees that remain, whether it's morale, maybe it's concern, maybe it's now they're doing the job of 2 people or 3 people instead of just their own job. So it has a tremendous impact on others. It impacts how many hours they may end up having to get the job done. And that then starts to cause a problem. So they start thinking, do I really need this? So retention is a real challenge there. And then the last one, I think, is the challenges we have of finding a suitable replacement. Gosh, we know the labor pool and the workforce pool is pretty dry. And I think right now that when you lose somebody unexpectedly, the challenges finding a suitable replacement are enormous. So those are some of my thoughts. If you have some others of your own of why this is so important, drop it in the chat box and we'll see if we get to it. But tell me, I'm also going to share some ideas with you on why do people leave, just so we have a good foundation. And people leave because of the infamous bad boss. Yeah, we still know that people leave because they aren't really either getting along with or feel their boss is overbearing. Maybe he's a micromanager. Maybe she doesn't lay out expectations or communication very well. But you have a bad boss and people quit bosses all of the time. We know that from past studies. We also know that the work and schedule flexibility is another reason people leave. You know, sometimes if we we've learned through COVID that if anything, we've got opportunities to work from home. Some people like that, some companies don't. So, but people will leave because they don't have work flexibility or schedule flexibility. That's starting to be a real concern for a lot of companies. I think we find that work-life balance, there's a lot of studies about work-life balance being more important today than it was back in the 70s or the 80s or even the 90s, for goodness sakes. Now, work-life balance, people are starting to value their time, their freedom. They are more apt to err on the side of family than they are on company. Sometimes people will leave because the culture has changed. The culture that they have been accustomed to for so many years is starting to change, and is changing in a way that they don't like, so they will leave the company. And you know, some companies don't have career advancement opportunities. And when there aren't any advancement opportunities for someone in an organization, they may just look outside and see that the grass might be greener somewhere else there. So if we don't have career advancement opportunities or career development opportunities, even, we're going to find that people will find that's a good reason for them to move on, because they will be better off somewhere else. And then how about compensation and benefits? In the past, people haven't really looked at benefits and compensation as a reason to leave. But these days, fair compensation, competitive compensation and benefits is a real issue, and companies need to pay greater attention to this. Otherwise, people will start to leave. We all know that things have gotten tighter, you know, in the economy, and they continue to get bad. So maybe compensation and benefits wasn't a big issue in the past, but it's starting to become one for a lot of organizations. And then there's a whole variety of other personal and business reasons. So if you happen to have some experiences with this and you want to drop that in the chat box or something like that, I really appreciate, you know, what are some of the reasons people in your company are leaving? 25% of you say it's a problem. What's the biggest problem? Why are they leaving? Is it for something I mentioned or some other reason? Feel free to share your thoughts there, and we'll see if we can visit on that a little bit later. So let me share with you the 3 leadership strategies for employee retention that I believe to be most critical. First of all, this is going to be no surprise to you. I think it's important for leaders to create a vision, mission, and culture people want to be part of. I mean, fundamental. If you don't have a vision, mission, and a culture people want to be part of, why would they want to be there? Now, you say, well, Randy, that's not a problem here. Well, really, is your vision and mission clear? Is it concise, and is it inspiring? Or do you even have one? And some organizations, that I'll tell you, they don't have one. So if you don't have an idea of where you're going or what your purpose is, or you know, a culture that's not really been well thought through or well developed, why does anybody want to stay there? I mean, I wouldn't, would you? So let's make sure that maybe if you're, you know, one of the third of the people on here in owner, senior leader, you can do something about your vision and mission, make sure it's clear, concise, and inspiring. That'd be awesome. If you aren't in that position, maybe you can make some suggestions to senior leaders to see if we can get that done. Because if you don't, you have a problem. Now, if you don't do it at a corporate level, depending on the type of organization you have, maybe your corporation doesn't have one. But if you're running a job site for you construction folks, maybe you could have a vision, mission on your job site. You know, maybe if you're in your manufacturing plant, maybe it's your shift. Maybe your shift can have a vision, a mission, and a culture that people want to be part of. I think that you have to be looking at your culture and say, hey, is your culture relevant today? You know, maybe it was really relevant years ago when it was created, but it isn't relevant today. Think about all the reasons why people are leaving organizations. Think about what it is they expect from organizations. So maybe your culture should evolve into something different than it is today, but you have to think about it. Is it relevant today? Are your policies current? Are your leaders providing the leadership that you want them and you need them to provide? Is your organization the kind of organization you are proud of? Are you active in the community? Is that important to you? So whatever you do, whatever level you're at, create a vision and a mission and a culture that people want to be part of. If you do that, they'll stay. You might even be able to attract some of them. The second one I say is you really set employee engagement as a strategic priority. And I'm not talking about employee satisfaction. I mean, I know people who are satisfied making a lot of good money, but they're not really contributing very much. They're really not engaged. They go there, they do the job, and then they go home with a big fat paycheck. And that can cause a lot of problems. What you want is an employee that's fully invested in your company, gives you that extra effort, that discretionary effort that you're looking for, and you're committed. And there is so important that you understand the drivers of employee engagement. And it's so important that you understand the causes of a disengaged employee. What causes that? So set it as a strategic priority. And I think you're going to find that you pay more attention to employee engagement and you'll have greater success with, again, whether it's just running a job site or it's running a corporation. And the third strategy I want to suggest to you is invest in developing the skills of your employees, all of them. I mean, if you're running a forklift, you want to run a forklift for the rest of your life? Probably some people do, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you could help that person who's running a forklift develop some other skills, maybe now they can get into the shipping office. Maybe they can now become part of your safety leadership team. Invest in developing the skills of your employees, whether it's, again, forklift operator or supervisors, superintendents, any sort of leaders. I think if you show that you invest in developing the skills of your employees, they're more likely to stay because it demonstrates that you care about them. And because you care about them, they'll start caring about you. Let's talk about some actions to achieve employee retention success real quick. These won't surprise you, just a matter of implementing them, I think. You got to listen. You really, really have to listen to your employees. What are they saying about why they're leaving? What are they saying about what they want? What are they saying about things? So here, let me give you some ideas on listening. The first thing you want to do about being a person who really listens is be available to listen. If you're always on the go, always on the phone, always involved in meetings, always traveling, do you really have time to listen? Make sure you're available to listen. And then when you listen, you want to be sure that you're approachable to listen. Are you cranky? Are you miserable? Are you, in a frantic kind of a way, and you don't really have time to listen so people don't approach you? And then next thing you know, they have a concern that never gets addressed, and then boom, they leave you. The retention is a problem. When you're listening, and I'm saying really listening, we all know you want to be present. And when I talk about being present, I can't help but share the story that I've got from one of my podcast guests. And I think that most of you or some of you may know that I host a podcast called the Leadership and Learning Podcast. And I had this guest, he was really good. And Tom Cork, he's now retired, CEO of Boise Cascade, and I were talking about listening one time, and this is what he said. So if you got volume, I'm going to put on his audio so you can hear it, and let's see how this works out.
The other thing I'd say about listening is, particularly the longer you've been in your career, the easier it is to just get into the trap of, okay, I know what to do, let's go get it done. And if you hear you need to listen long enough that you truly understand what people are trying to tell you if you think they're trying to head in a different direction. And I would always tell you, and this will force you to listen as opposed to starting to answer the question in your head. And I guess one thing I should do, Randy, is describe what listening is. Well, listening is not having a conversation in your head while the other person is talking.
I mean, how brilliant is all of this? Listening is not having a conversation in your head. And how many of us do that sometimes? We tend to want to answer before they're finished. We tend to not hear everything more thoroughly. We have to develop the techniques to make sure that we are listening. And look at the first paragraph here. What he says, the longer you've been in your career, the easier it is to just fall into a trap of, I know what to do. I don't have to listen. Well, you're wrong. You have to listen, or at least you should listen. You may have the right idea. You may have the right solution. But what about Randy Jr. over here? What does he think? What about Mary? What does Mary think? Let's get their opinions and their ideas, because that then demonstrates we're truly listening. But you've got to find ways to not have that conversation in your head. And there's so many different techniques. My favorite one is if you just maintain eye contact and repeat back what the person said, or to the extent that what you heard them say. That's probably the most common one, but there are so many others which we don't have time in this webinar to go through it all, because that's a 2-hour webinar on its own. But you do have to listen to understand. And if you say, well, Randy, I listen. Well, give us in the chat box, tell us how you listen. Tell us what is your favorite technique or tip you've got for listening to the other person. Another action is, well, why don't we inspire your team to make a difference? Again, it goes back to the purpose, the mission. What is your mission? How do you inspire your team to make a difference? Well, maybe you could share with it what their purpose truly is, what their contribution is, give them some feedback on how well they're doing, recognize them for their efforts. But you can inspire your team a lot of different ways. You can do it with quotes. You can do it with your own quotes. You could do it with stories. Tell them some of your stories. Tell them stories of others. Give them your pep talks. There's a lot of ways to inspire your team on telling them that how they can make a difference, showing them how they can make a difference. One of the stories I like to share with people, I learned from, or heard from the priest at my uncle's one-year memorial service. And here's what he told us. He said, listen, he went to a job site, and at the job site, he saw this young fella who was hauling bricks in a wheelbarrow, just kind of like this one. And he goes from up to the fellow and says, hey, tell me, young fellow, what are you doing here? And the person said, well, I take these bricks in this wheelbarrow and I take them right across this other place over here, and I give them to this guy named Billy. So then he goes over to where Billy was, and he says, hey, young fella, tell me, what are you doing here? And this fellow said, oh, I'm just mixing up cement and mortar so I could give it to Billy. And said, well, who's Billy? Well, this is Billy. Billy's the bricklayer. So he says, Billy, tell me, what are you doing here? And Billy says, I'm building a hospital. I'm building a hospital so that someday when your kids are sick, they have a place to go. Maybe if it isn't your kids, it's your grandkids, your nephews, your nieces, somebody who has a place to go get better. He's not just, the point of the story is he's not just a bricklayer, he's got a purpose. So he goes to work every day thinking about building this hospital for these kids. Now, if you are just the guy running the wheelbarrow all day long, how long do you want to do that before you decide to quit? So for those of you in the construction industry, and there's a fair bit of you here, 62% of you, what's your purpose? Let's make sure your employees at every level understand your purpose. If you are a manufacturer, what is your true purpose? Are you building plywood, particle board, OSB, engineered wood? What are you manufacturing? So what? What is your purpose and what does it do? And I think when you do that, people have a better appreciation for what they do every day. Let's talk about empowering your team. Giving people the authority and the power to do something. I find that there's not enough empowerment going on. And then sometimes the empowerment isn't handled properly because we haven't taught anybody, trained anybody, mentored anybody, coached anybody on how to deal with all that power. So empowerment is really awesome because it builds trust. And if you have trust with your employees, do you think they're going to quit? No, they trust you and you trust them. So I think empowerment can help you retain employees. I think you can also remember back when you're a kid, maybe your mom or your parents were in the kitchen baking a cake and you're just maybe 7 or 8 years old, or maybe even younger, you didn't know how to bake a cake, but you knew it'd be really good to lick the spoon. So that was your job. You get to taste it and lick the spoon. Or maybe you were in the garage helping your parents work on the vehicle and you don't know how to work on a vehicle, but guess what? You can stand there and hold a wrench or pass your dad or your mom a screwdriver. That's easy to do, but you were doing something. And the point of all that is very simple. Empowerment builds confidence and independence. And when it does that, employees feel their contribution is much more valued. And if they're feeling much more valued, then guess what? They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to stick with you because they feel you want them, you need them, and you like them. Let's talk about developing the skills of frontline supervisors. And we've got a lot of you covered here in this webinar. Gosh, what did we say? We had 80%. No, we had 80, almost 90% of you probably have frontline supervisors of some sort. Let's develop their skills. Let's develop their communication skills. Let's develop their ability to interact with people, not just be the boss of people, but how they treat and teach, how they treat people is a direct correlation to whether or not people want to stay. Let's teach them to be respectful of people. Let's teach them to be consistent, treating people fairly, consistently, how their behavior is important when it comes to being consistent. Let's teach them to be authoritative without being overbearing. I mean, how important is that? I mean, we just put through, in the last, well, so far this year, we put through almost 100 people through a supervisor training course, teaching them this because no one's ever taught them this. They've always learned from their previous bosses, and we don't invest in the training of supervisors. Supervisors are key to retention. We've got to teach them how to be great supervisors. And here's the fifth one. Remember I talked about employee engagement? You may be a little confused about that because we measure employee satisfaction all the time. No. I don't want about satisfaction. I want engagement. And I'm not talking about measuring it with the 12 questions that came from whoever came up with them. I can't remember. I wish I could remember. I don't remember, but you probably do. The measure their employee engagement. Here's how we do it. We take a look and have a robust view of employee engagement. We measure the culture of engagement. How is it ingrained in the culture? What about the strategic alignment? Are the people aligned in the field with what the corporate offices want to do? Are the managers motivating and relating to employees? And are we managing execution carefully? And what about all this other stuff? We got barriers to growth, diversity, inclusion. Are you measuring this in the kind of detail? And if you're not, you should. Because when you are able to do this, you can identify opportunities to improve. And you can identify opportunities of people who are disengaged and then work towards engaging them. You can work towards it in much greater detail than I'm showing you here. So let's scoot over to the three biggest leadership mistakes that I think impact the success of employee retention. Now, there's a lot of mistakes, and you might have a few you want to share with us as well, and I'm all for that. But right now, one of the biggest mistakes I find that leaders make is not continuing to develop and refine your own leadership skills. What are you doing to get better? Well, you go to a conference, one conference a year. I mean, we've got a lot of HR professionals. We get a lot of senior leaders on here. What are you really doing to get better? Are you listening to podcasts? Or obviously, you're trying to get better by listening to this webinar, and I appreciate you being here. But I hope that there's more to it than that for you. And I hope that you're investing the time you need to invest to continue to develop and refine your own leadership skills. There's this article I hung on to, is a couple of years old, but Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey all use the 5-hour rule. And the 5-hour rule is they spend 5 hours per week doing deliberate learning. Wow, 5 hours a week. That's pretty good. You do 5 hours a week. And that's hard for us to do because we've got stuff to get done. but let's talk about how we can do that. I mean, why we should do that. If you consider that you do some professional development 5 hours a week, and think about, I could read, I can listen to podcasts, I can attend seminars, I can attend webinars, I can get a mentor, I can get a coach, I can do my own research, I can do a lot of different things. 5 hours a week can go by. I mean, it's not a lot of time. It's really not. But it equates to 260 hours per year. 260 hours per year equates to 32 and a half days per year based on an 8-hour day. So just think about this, if you could commit to and accomplish 5 hours a week, you've got basically a full month of professional development training. It's just math. And I think that you just have to figure out, what would you like to get better at? Maybe it's listening. Maybe it's coaching skills. Maybe it's delegation skills. Whatever it is that you feel you need to help you become a better leader, there are ways, economical ways, to get that done. I just encourage you to do that, because if you don't, it's a mistake because you're falling behind. How about mistake number 2, not tackling the little things? The little things. What are the little things? What are the little things in your world? How about silos? Do we have silos? Do we have accounting department versus the estimating department? Do we have HR versus manufacturing? Do we have ownership against hourly workers? What do we have? What are the problems, or what are the squabbles? Are they policies that are outdated? Are they procedures that don't make any sense? If you let all of that stuff just sit there because they're just little things, I haven't got time for that, they become the big things. And when they become the big things, or they start to become bigger, people will quit. They say, I don't want to work there anymore because I can't stand the problems I've got with the silos. I can't stand the problems I've got with the miscommunication. Whatever the little things are, you need to tackle them before they become big things. So to do that, you have to look for red flags. What are the red flags in your organization? Do you have a boss? One of your supervisors maybe being a little bit of a overbearing, and you kind of tolerate it because guess what? He's been here 15 years and he does a pretty good job in running the manufacturing plant. Oh, really? Wasn't that great? Well, but he's running people out the door because of the way he is behaving, or the way he is being micromanaging, or the way he is managing them. So look for the red flags and then deal with them. Another thing I can offer you is to look. Have you ever been on a boat, on a lake that's so clear that you can see the bottom? And when you are on this lake and you see the bottom, you recognize that, oh, look, there's a rock. It's just above the surface. So guess what? You avoid the rock. You boat around the rock because you don't want to run into it because it's going to cause you a problem. Well, think about it in your world. What are the rocks beneath your surface? What really is there that you're not addressing? Maybe you don't see it. Maybe you're not looking for it. Maybe you should spend a few minutes just to get a little bit more clarity on what it is that could cause you a problem. I picked up this line from a client of mine. I just love it because it is so true. We tend to just buzz through this without seeing the rocks, and next thing, boom, it hits you. And think about it, when somebody unexpectedly leaves your organization, that's kind of a rock beneath the surface. Should have saw it coming, should have done something about it. And you've got other people who are thinking about leaving today. You need to be thinking about what you can do today to make sure that doesn't happen. And the third one I'm going to share with you is leadership inconsistency. Inconsistency between the different leaders. So you've got conflicting messages. Maybe you've got inconsistency in the way you treat people. Maybe you have inconsistency in the way you make decisions. Maybe in the decisions you make. Maybe it's telling them one thing and doing another. Maybe you know what your inconsistencies are, but whenever you're inconsistent, in your messages or you're inconsistent in whatever it is that you're trying to do, your credibility as a leader is impacted, negatively impacted. And I want you to be careful about making sure you don't make this mistake, because if you do, it's a very hard thing to earn trust. It's a very hard thing to prove your character. So just be mindful of that. And here, I'm going to give you one more bonus mistake. This is one that I published for some of you who get my leadership tip of the week. I've just published it last week, and it was a big hit because I got a lot of people wrote me notes afterwards. And that is promoting somebody who isn't ready. You know, you got people leaving. That's happening. People leave your organization. So, okay, what do we do? Well, we're going to put Randy in there. Randy's going to be in charge of whatever, XYZ. Well, Randy's in charge of XYZ, but he doesn't know what the heck he's doing. So suddenly Randy's in charge, but Randy hasn't been trained, coached, mentored well enough to be able to manage XYZ. So the people now that he's managing look at this and say, wow, it's time for me to move on because my boss is a jerk and doesn't know what he's doing. And this is what kind of organization decisions our organization makes, and I don't want to be part of it. So you just think about that. So my tip of the week struck a chord with a lot of people. So I appreciate the comments if anybody's on the call. But what do you do when you don't promote someone who isn't ready? So that's probably a question you're thinking, well, I don't have any, but what do I do? Figure out a way to do something on an interim basis. People get terminated, people quit, but doesn't mean you should make the wrong decision of putting somebody in charge if they're not ready. Figure out ways, and it depends on the specific situation, on different ways to do it. I mean, I've ran businesses in the past where we have had unexpected people leave, and people leave because we wanted to. And although it was unexpected, we still figured out how to not lose anything in the transition. So let's not do that. All right. So here we're coming close to the end of our time. I wanted to ask you, did you pick up a nugget or two that maybe you hadn't had before you got here? Because if you did, that's awesome. That's what we wanted to do. And did I give you something else to think about? Because again, in 40 minutes, 45 minutes, although you can, I can't talk about any one topic maybe for 45 minutes. It's a couple, 3 hours, but did I give you something to think about? Thinking about your culture. Think about, what are you not doing that you should be doing? What are you not doing that you could be doing? And I think that's important for you to take away is, did I give you something to think about? So I am open to take any questions, Danielle, that may have popped up. I can't see them if there's any out there. So if you could share some with me, I'd be happy to respond in the next few minutes while we have that available.
Sure. I don't have any questions coming in quite yet, but if anyone does have questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A function. I did want to share, Randy, back earlier when you were talking about the importance of really listening, and you asked a question about how other people listen. Lots of people chimed in and replied that their best tactic there is to repeat back. Lots of people said they like to repeat back. Someone else, Crystal, mentioned taking notes while the other person is talking. Yeah, by saying, this is what I think I hear you saying, you not only communicate to them that you were in fact listening and paying attention, but it also avoids potential future problems by confirming that what you heard is in fact what they meant. So
well, that's very good. I really appreciate people sharing those tips with you. And I think that, they do work. And I think everybody knows that what works for them. But think about the other foot, put the shoe on the other foot when you set expectations. So if you set an expectation of somebody and it's, okay, Randy, I expect that you by the end of Friday would do X, Y, Z. And did Randy really hear what you said about X, Y, Z? And I said, yeah, okay. but did you really hear what Randy said? So what we have to do is ask a follow-up question. Just to make sure my expectation is clear, walk me through your understanding of what I'm looking for. You see where I'm going? You ask the question, you set the expectation, and people have a tendency to say, yes, I understand. But maybe they were having a conversation in their head and they really weren't understanding what you said. They didn't hear it all. They understood the big picture, but they were thinking about how to do it versus something else. So what I'm getting at is when you set expectations, seek understanding of the expectation that you're setting to make sure that the other person was in fact listening. Walk me through your understanding of what I'm looking for is a very powerful question.
Yeah, for sure. We did have a question just come in. Someone is asking if you have any thoughts or tips on development within a small organization. There are only so many spots and places for people to move. So how can you develop individuals in a small organization?
Yeah, I think that anytime you can create an individual development plan that's specific for an individual, large company or small company, it's going to be very valuable for you. An individual development plan is what do we need to work on? What are the highest priorities? We have maybe 10 things we need to do, but let's not do 10 things at one time to help develop that person. Let's work on the most important things. And you do that by creating an individual development plan. And whoever is asking the question, if they want to drop me an email, I'll send them some templates they could use. No charge for the templates. You can use these templates if they work for you or create your own. And it addresses timelines, addresses what, who, and why we're doing it. And I think that's probably the best thing is have it a formal plan of what you need to work on prioritized.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, you make a good point. In a small organization, there's only so many places for people to move, but if you don't have another seat to move or elevate that person into, you can still, as Randy said, create these development plans and identify areas for improvement, and then maybe, purchase an online class for them or send them to conferences, just showing that you as the employer are investing in that individual, even if you don't at this point in time have a spot to move them into.
And Danielle, let me also add, I think what your company does, what Team Engine does with software can help small companies a great deal. And, I'm a small company. I've got a couple of employees and so on like that. But we have experience working with other companies to help support our company with things that we're not experts in, things we don't have time for. And I think when you're looking at attracting people and recruiting people and retaining people, the software that Team Engine offers is something you should look at. And I think the scan me on the side of the screen, I'm going to show you another one here if you want. Take a look at what companies like Team Engine offer in terms of software that can help you manage your people and develop your people, because by developing them to, head up a project like something like this is really very beneficial. I'm sorry to interrupt you. That was your plug. That's what I want to plug you because I love you guys so much.
Well, thank you for that, Randy. Yeah, we do have one more question here before we wrap up. Someone who's an HR professional is asking how you recommend making this information available to executive leaders who are in fact making the mistake of leadership inconsistency and not being on the same page. As the HR person, how do you approach those executives and open up that dialogue?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question is, hey, boss, you need some help, but I don't want to tell you that you need some help. And that's it's a very challenging thing. So let's talk about some of the options. I mean, when people leave your company, I would assume that you do a exit interview. If you don't, you should. And when you get an exit interview, you could then share the results of that interview with the boss. And maybe you'll find that people are leaving because of your example, inconsistencies. Well, if that's the case, you can say, look, boss, the last 10 people who left were all sort of threaded together with the reason they left had a great deal to do with inconsistencies in this, and this. So that might help get the message. Maybe then you could offer them a solution of, let's get some outside help to help you with how do we eliminate inconsistencies, as an example. I think that if people have bosses that are challenged, and especially if it's a company that's family owned or maybe privately owned, it's a real challenge. And only thing I can do is just share with them what you've learned, share with them your experiences, share with them the problems that the company's having, go back to tackling the little things before they're big things. And quite often, and I work with a lot of them, the boss will say, oh, that little conflict between Randy and Betty, it'll go away, no problem. No, it's a big problem because Betty suddenly quits or Randy suddenly quits. And now how do we replace 20 years or 25 years worth of experience because we didn't resolve the squabble over something internal? And I think that we can't get our senior leaders to look the other way, and can't get them to be focused just on the bottom line. We got to get them to be focused on the people, because it's the people that generate the bottom line, and it's people that generate the top line. And I think that if we ignore our people, we show less caring for our people, and we are going to continue to have retention problems. So I don't really have a lot of great advice except call me and give me some more specifics, and maybe I'll just be able to help you a little bit better. So that's the best I can do with that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Randy. Thank you, everyone on the call today. We are at time, so we're going to go ahead and conclude. But there were some questions about recordings. The presentation was recorded, so if you want to share it internally in your organization, we will be sending out a recording of that, so you can go back and review all the concepts today. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and end. So thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Team Engine. And thanks again for everybody for being here. And be safe out there. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.